This is a story of a cultural sea change, one that's reshaping the way we think about a balanced and sustainable transportation system.
The American dream has always been a vision that's important to my family. I think about the story of my grandmother coming to this country. So she grew up in Manila in the Philippines in extreme poverty, and she wanted to create a better life for herself, her children, and her family. And I remember talking to her as a young child and what that vision actually was for her. And a big part of it was owning a home, moving to the suburbs, and also another part of that was owning a car. I soon realized that that wasn't actually, the sort of vision that I had in my own life. I actually didn't get my license until I was 18, and then now as an adult, I still don't have a car, still don't drive a bunch, and more heavily rely on train and bus and public transportation.
I have never owned a car. I've made choices over the last few years about where I would live, based largely on where I could live without a car. I like that lifestyle better. Most of the people I know and grew up with like the convenience and like being able to get around without a car.
I first really noticed that young people, and particularly college students, were not that interested in driving and more interested in good public transportation options when I was working with students at USC, the University of Southern California in LA. I was working in California from 2006 to 2010. An Inconvenient Truth, the kind of groundbreaking movie about climate change and sustainability, came out right around then, so 2006. So, think back 10 years ago, Al Gore is cool, global warming is bad, the sustainability movement is kind of just kicking off, and young people are really, just like digging their claws in and really getting down and dirty into this movement to green their campuses, to green their communities, to green the country, and public transportation is a huge part of this. Cars were like their parents, the older generation, less cool, polluting, clunky, inconvenient actually. Where do you put a car on a college campus? It's expensive. They want to have the ability to kind of just pick up and go and get on a train or get on a bus or ride their bike or whatever it is to get from here to there in a clean, efficient, sustainable way. There came an opportunity for us to actually put some serious effort into passing a high-speed rail ballot initiative in 2008 that would provide the initial funding for a high-speed rail system. And the high-speed rail train would go from northern to southern California.
The first thing I heard was that it would take me from LA to the Bay Area in 2.5 hours. That caught my attention and that sounded awesome. We decided we would travel the route of the proposed high-speed rail line and put on press conferences with local leaders.
Collecting thousands of petitions, meeting with local officials.
Of all the campaigns that I worked on, students were, I think, the most excited about this. They recognized that it was a historic campaign.
I think we were in the news over 40 times in the course of the week. It was a lot of fun.
We were able to pass the first initiative on the ballot in 2008.
Frontier Group is a nonprofit public interest think tank, and our mission is to contribute information and ideas to help build a cleaner, fairer, healthier, and more democratic America. Our role oftentimes is to work with nonprofit organizations such as US PIRG and US PIRG Education Fund to provide the data and ideas to support the work that they're doing on a whole host of issues, but in this case, in terms of transportation, to advocate for a cleaner, more diverse, more sustainable system of transportation for American communities. When we drive less, there are a whole host of benefits that accrue not just to us, but also to society at large. So there are environmental benefits. We're producing less pollution that contributes to global warming, that harms the health of people living nearby. There are economic benefits, since people who drive less, it costs them less to own, maintain, and fuel their vehicles. There are public health benefits, since as people move away from sitting in traffic and increasingly walk or bike to places where they need to go, they're healthier and happier. And there's also national security benefits. The United States is still heavily dependent on oil, and when we drive less and use other modes of transportation more, we're reducing that dependence and some of the national security challenges that come with it. Using other modes of transportation also enables us to remain connected. It's very difficult. You hear all of these stories about people who are driving while texting or driving while checking their email, and how dangerous that is, both for the drivers and for pedestrians and other people who are using the streets. When people are using public transportation, they're able to remain connected via social media. They're able to remain connected at work and to do so safely in a way that improves their productivity and contributes to the safety of everyone. I think we knew beginning around 2010 that there was something going on, that there was some change that was happening among young people in their transportation behaviors that was worth noticing. And then the thing that ultimately cemented that for us was when the National Household Travel Survey data came out in late 2011. And what that data showed was that young people were actually driving dramatically less than they had similar groups of young people had a decade before. So we decided, in conversation with the US PIRG Education Fund, to do a report that looked into those trends a little bit more deeply. When we do decide on an idea, it really is a collaborative process with Frontier Group usually driving the research and initial writing of the reports, but then US PIRG Education Fund staff, people like Phineas Baxendall, really contributing their knowledge and expertise and understanding of what's happening in the world to then make that product something that really has the maximum impact in the policy debate, which ultimately is the thing that we're all looking for.
Well, the millennials have become the largest generation in America. Our transportation future will largely depend on the habits of the millennials. And so what they want and what they are doing are going to be the imprint of America's transportation for decades to come. The data show that Americans from 16 to 34 years of age cut their driving miles from 2001 to 2009 by 23%. That's almost a quarter. It shows that they took fewer trips by car, that they took shorter trips by car, and they took more trips by other modes of transportation besides driving. But while they're driving less, they are taking public transportation more, they are biking more, and they are walking more as a way to get to work. Compared to a decade ago, young people are less likely to be moving from cities to suburbs. That's a real change. So driver's licensing is something where you can see this really dramatically. Back in 1996, 85% of high school seniors had their driver's license. In 2010, that number was down to 73%. That's a big difference. Young people are not the only ones who are driving less. For 6 decades, Americans drove more and more pretty much every year. In the middle of last decade, that changed so that Americans were driving less, and then flattening out towards driving has really stagnated over time. On average, Americans now drive as much as they did back in the second term of Bill Clinton. In total, we drive only as much as we did back in 2007. Another thing which has changed is this explosive growth in new technologically enabled transportation options. Things like Lyft and Uber, car sharing, bike sharing, but also apps that make it easy to navigate on public transit. All of this is all riding on a new wave of technology-enabled transportation options, which are just going to be more important in the future. US PIRG realized this trend. We worked with our partner think tank Frontier Group to create reports that put a spotlight on that data. We got it out in the media where it generated a lot of attention and awareness about this new trend.
The millennial generation are more likely to want to live in more urban, walkable and bikeable neighborhoods.
The millennial generation cut down their driving the most when compared to any other age group.
What we're beginning to see is that the awareness of this trend is spreading beyond just the media. It's something that policymakers are beginning to understand and beginning to take into consideration when they make decisions about transportation or other kinds of policy.
Most of the dramatic change that we've witnessed over the past decades happened in Pittsburgh's East End, the home of Carnegie Mellon University, the University of Pittsburgh, the hospital structure, and also companies like Google. We've seen a lot more young people that are moving in for the opportunities through these new jobs. And now what we're seeing is a different type of apartment model that is being developed mainly for a younger clientele. We're trying to stay in that same area as they work. That's what young people are looking for today. Pittsburgh had been behind when it came to multimodal planning, and in particular creating complete street models for the city of Pittsburgh. When we design a city, you design it in a way that is designed for the automobile, and that's how Pittsburgh was designed. 1945 to 1955, we tore down buildings, we widened streets, we actually even built bridges and tunnels, and what did we end up seeing? People move further and further away from the city. The first thought was, how does this designed for the automobile? We have adapted with the market. We announced earlier this year the the largest contiguous complete streets plan in America. A complete street model looks at it differently. It says that not everyone owns a car. In fact, the majority of people who work in downtown Pittsburgh take public transit, bike, or walk to work. So what are we doing for them? So when you create a complete street model, it means you take into all those different users into consideration when you design how your public space is being used. In our first 6 months, we created the first protected bike lanes in the city, and we have an aggressive plan over 8 years to create a network system that will then connect into our river trail system and create basically a superhighway system for biking in the city of Pittsburgh. We want to be able to set the bar extremely high and have other cities follow us. What it means for the future is that we'll be able to hand to the next generation something that enhances upon what was given to us.
So these trends are going to be really important for the future. We want to be spending our transportation dollars in ways that realize the aspirations of Americans who are going to be the chief users of our transportation system. We need to look hard at what it is that young people want and be building the system that they're aspiring for, not the American dream of their grandfathers.
There has been a cultural shift in having more people relying on public transportation or even walking and biking. We know that people need more access to quality public transportation, such as buses and trains. And it's clear that millennials and young people who use this most there's a higher demand for it with less driving. So I think where we need to go and where the vision, well, at least the future vision should lie, is more investment in public transportation. We need to continue to push the envelope forward and make sure we have a good transportation future.